Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's very nice to have you all here, and I welcome all of you, each and every one of you, to Chania. My name is Eleni Mylona. I am one of the newest members of the Duke EURECA-PRO team, and it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Antonia Trichopoulou as the first of our esteemed keynote speakers of the third EURECA-PRO Conference on Responsible Consumption and Production. Dr. Trichopoulou studied medicine at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. She was professor and director of the Nutrition and Biochemistry Center of the National School of Public Health. In addition, Dr. Trichopoulou has served as a professor of preventative medicine and nutrition at the medical school of her alma mater, that is the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. She has served as the head of the Collaborating Center for Nutrition of the World Health Organization and adjunct professor at Harvard School of Public Health. In 2006, Dr. Trichopoulou co-founded the non-profit Hellenic Health Foundation, of which she is the president today. Additionally, Dr. Trichopoulou has contributed to functions of the National Medicine Organization, the National Center for Public Administration, the Eleni Mylona Hospital, one of the major hospitals in Greece, located in Athens, as chair of the board of directors, and also on various committees of the Ministry of Health. Abroad, Dr. Trichopoulou has also served in committees of the World Health Organization and the European Union. Her scientific research, both in Greece and abroad, concerns public health and focuses on the epidemiology of chronic diseases and the development of health databases within the scientific scope of health promotion and disease prevention of primarily the Greek population. Dr. Trichopoulou's research has received international recognition, while she has been honored by the President of the Hellenic Republic with the Golden Cross for her contribution to medical science. Dr. Trichopoulou has contributed greatly to the global scale interest on the benefits of the traditional Mediterranean, essentially traditional Greek diet. At the academic level, Dr. Trichopoulou has mentored a number of medical doctors and health scientists, many of which are distinguished in Greece as well as abroad. In 2014, Dr. Trichopoulou was included in the Thomson Reuters list of researchers with the most references to their scientific work. In 2021, she was included in the Clarivate Analytics highly cited researchers as one of the researchers who have the most significant scientific influence worldwide. Without further ado, Dr. Trichopoulou, the podium is yours to guide us from the Mediterranean to the planetarian diet, nutritional diversity, health, and sustainability. Thank you very much.
Dear Rector, dear colleagues and friends, it's really my privilege to be here in this meeting. And really, I thanks very much the Technical University of Crete, more specifically the previous dean, Mr. Dr. Diamandopoulos, for inviting me here. Well, I'm also happy because I'm given tonight the opportunity to express both my scientific beliefs as well as my love for the Mediterranean way of living. Having said that, I will refer to an ancient Greek philosopher, Aristotle, who said that the beginning of the right education is the examination of words. It's to know the definition of words in order to communicate more efficiently. And I'm saying that because the Mediterranean diet as a term usually intentionally or unintentionally is misused. So, at least in the tonight presentation, I will tell you which way I am using the term, which is the definition of the Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean diet is the dietary pattern found in the olive-grown areas of the Mediterranean region in the late 50s and early 60s. And you will ask, why in the late 60s? Because, as you know, after the 60s, big socioeconomic changes happened all over the world, and of course in the Mediterranean region. Thus, we change a lot of our dietary habits. So, when we are talking about Mediterranean diet, we are talking about the dietary pattern existing in the 60s in the olive oil-grown areas. Because traditional Mediterranean diet without olive oil does not exist. Olive oil is the center of the Mediterranean diet. Also, I wish to tell you, to remind you, that in this Mediterranean Sea, for thousands of years, people, merchants, poets, and ideas and religions, they were circulating for thousands of years. And at the end, all these disparate components, they were molded in one expression, the Mediterranean way of living. And the Mediterranean and the Mediterranean diet is maybe the most known expression, one of the many expressions of the Mediterranean way of living. So, it's not only the Mediterranean diet a dietary pattern, foods, of nutrients, of calories. It expresses a way of living, something more than that. Having said that, here you can see the visual representation of the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet is a very simple diet. It is a plant-based diet which accepts the animal foods, but the issue is how much and how often. Mediterranean diet is very open to all the foods. It's not restrictive, only how much and how often. So, having said that, I remind you that olive oil is very central, and there are several. It's high in legumes, high in fruit, high in vegetables, moderate consumption of dairy products, very little meat, and wine consumption. Wine consumption in the Mediterranean area, first of all, we do not have alcoholism, a history of alcoholism. The children, they never touch alcohol, wine actually. The women, they drink much less than the men. And the men, when they drink wine, they will drink, all of us, wine during meals. This is very important from a scientific point of view, but I will not expand to that now. We drink milk not to forget the life, not alone in binge drinking. We drink during meals, in company, to share life rather than to forget life. It's a cultural issue. And it's very important from a scientific point of view that it is consumed during meals. And I want also to stress the fact that the Mediterranean diet is a pattern. It's not separate foods or specific magic bullets. Eat that, and you will have more hair, and eat that, you will become clever, or eat that, and you will not know what will happen. It's a pattern. And because the pattern is many different foods together, a variety of foods which they interact. That's why when we're doing research and we try to find why the Mediterranean diet is so good for our health, we see that the expression, statistical expression for their beneficial effects is much higher if you consider the pattern than the individual foods. So, I want, before moving to the next point of my presentation, to mention some myths and misconception which very often is used in the Mediterranean diet. When we're talking about olive oil, we do not mean that it's solid fat, butter, margarine, cream, cheese, coconut, palm, tropical oils. When we're talking about vegetables, we do not speak about such vegetables. I remember sometimes I was studying the dietary habits of a country, and then I was surprised because it was, in this country, the vegetable intake was very high. I said, well, in this country, which kind of vegetable they are eating? Potatoes. Potato is not vegetable, it's a tuber. That's why here, in the recent misconception, we say that starchy vegetables predominate over lower calorie vegetables. This is not correct. Fruits, seasonal fruits, during the season. And you go on and on and on, but we have to focus in these misuses and to dispel them. And to know when a food is labeled Mediterranean, to correspond to what was eaten in the 60s, not what is produced now. So, I want to say also that in the 60s, you will not believe that, but this was so, a Greek man at the age of 45 was the most long-lived person in the world. At this time, a Greek man could survive much more than an American one or a Japanese one. The Japanese now, they are first in the ranking. We are far below today. And at that time, the cancer mortality and the specific mortality for coronary heart disease was much lower than in Japan or in the United States. And at that time, Greece was very poor in the 60s. So we cannot claim that our health system was one of the best. And then at that time also the Greeks, they were heavy smokers. So we can really claim that at that time, the Greeks, of course, they were following the traditional Mediterranean diet. It might, due to this diet, that they were so long-lived. Then, Ansel Keys, a professor from Minnesota University, came and he did the famous, the classical 7-country study. At that time, the president of the United States, Eisenhower, has a heart attack. And his cardiologist, White, I think was his name, he said, come on, what here we have so many heart attacks in the Mediterranean, they do not have. So they found money, they were funded to do the 7-country study, which is famous. And in these 7-country studies, it was demonstrated that the lower mortality rate was in Crete. You see, in the first, you can see in this slide, Crete, he has the lowest mortality rate from all the other countries which they participate in the 7 countries. So, Ansel Keys and his collaborator were the first who considered Mediterranean diet as a diet protecting from coronary heart diseases because of its low saturated fat content. And having a low saturated fat content meant that the levels of the cholesterol were very low. So it was the first time, it was a kind of a revolution. It was the first time in Finland they changed automatically and they changed from lard to seed oils and so on and so on. But On the other hand, the emphasis during the coming years after the 60s shifted from the interest for the low saturated fat content of this Mediterranean diet to its high content in olive oil and its overall composition. And the scientists, they start studying the effects of the various nutrients, not only for coronary heart diseases, but for other chronic diseases like cancer, neurodegenerative, and diabetes, and so on. But for 40 years, we have a lot of studies referring to the association of the Mediterranean foods, but not the pattern. And this might have been due to the fact that they were not a way to assess the adherence to the Mediterranean diet. And moreover, it was very difficult to define a pattern. So, in the 1995, we and then others, we operationalized the Mediterranean diet by developing a pattern based on the main components of the Mediterranean diet. And then we developed a very simple unidimensional score by giving 1 point to the person who they consume over the average in a given population of the beneficial foods, and 0 to the non-beneficial items. By implementing this score in a Greek cohort of elders in 1995, it was our great surprise to find out that adherence to the Mediterranean diet was high adherence to the Mediterranean diets. It was associated with a 17 degrees mortality. Then, after that, many studies they follow, using the adherence to Mediterranean diet as a pattern and not as individual foods. And very briefly, I will mention that here there is a comprehensive overview on the relative risks of the various types of cancer and their association for the Mediterranean diet. For all this type of cancer, Mediterranean diet showed a decreased risk. High adherence to Mediterranean diet was associated with a low risk. More, for some types of cancer, less for others. Similar results, they were mentioned about the adherence to Mediterranean diet and several other chronic diseases. So, nowadays, the Mediterranean diet is accepted as a very healthy diet all over the world. Nobody comments on that. And every day there are coming more and more papers dealing with this issue. But the first publication about the abandonment of the Mediterranean diet came from Crete as early as 1997, when very excellent Greek medical professor, medical doctor, Dr. Kafatos, he said that the Mediterranean diet are abandoning their traditional eating choice, and this was noted in the participants, the Cretan participants in the 7 countries cohort. Even those who participated in the 7 countries and the data of whom they provided the very low mortality in Crete, they were abandoning after some years in Mediterranean diet. And the same, some years later, was noticed in the Italian cohort in Crevalcore, in Apulia, by our colleague De Lorenzo. are coming to today Greece, from our Idria National Survey, you will notice a big gap between the group under 65 and over 65. The persons who are more than 65, they adhere to a Mediterranean diet by 40%, I think. Yes, it's almost 40%. But the person who they are less, on the average, they adhere to Mediterranean diet by 25%. So the younger generation is abandoning the traditional Mediterranean diet. It's alarming. It's alarming, really. We have the most obese children in the world, in Europe almost, in Greece, in many other indices, they are not good. And then in this study, I choose to demonstrate the results of this study because it was run with the same protocol in 8 countries, Greece, Spain, Italy, Cyprus, Poland, I think. And in this, Estonia, Belgium, Hungary, Sweden, and you will be surprised that more than half of the Swedish children reported high adherence to components of the Mediterranean diet. The lowest levels were observed in Cyprus. Comparison with other Mediterranean countries is not easy because the data, they are not comparable. Which we found that they are rather comparable, then they are data provided by FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, because they categorize the foods as well as the socioeconomic variables in the same system. So we can say that their data are comparable. So you see that in Mediterranean countries, namely Algeria, Greece, Italy, Spain, Tunisia, Turkey, and so on, in all the countries, there is an increase of the consumption of animal foods. And that this abandonment, has also 2 aspects, which they are very, 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 very bad. One is, of course, that the population which they abandon the Mediterranean diet is good for their health. But what else? They're bad for the environment. Because as I mentioned before, the Mediterranean diet is a plant-based diet. And all we know that sustainable consumption and production patterns, they have a big influence in the climate change. I will be more analytical later on, but it's said repeatedly in the literature that more than 30% of the gas emission, they are due to the way the food systems now works. But why that? There is, and you might know, the Eat Lancet Committee. It was a committee set by the Lancet journal. This committee worked for 3 years, and they published their report in 2019, and then they continued working. And I recommend this paper because in this paper you can find all the rationale for the role of the food systems in the climate crisis. It's calculated that the consumption of the effects of the consumption of animal foods in the gas production and the use of land. And we see that the plant-based diets and the plant foods, they have much more carbon dioxide production and much more or less use of land. And more than that, In this report, it's mentioned that if we decided today to adopt the recommended international healthy diet, because in this EAT committee they developed an international healthy diet, and we'll talk about that in a moment, then by 2030, we are going to save more than 11 million premature deaths. You cannot ignore that. And this recommended diet is based, actually, is the Mediterranean diet. And you will see what I mean. Here is what was mentioned since 2014. Nobody say that the food they were consumed, our dietary habits, also our daily responsibility, our responsibility for the climate crisis belongs to us also, the way we are eating. And this has been said 2014. And even although it's written in the goal 12 of the United Nations, this issue does not appear. It appears about energy, about other sources of energy. But here we have our everyday practice, in which everybody can continue by changing dietary habits. And I hope that that's what we are here. And that you will help on that. So, I said before about this developed by the EAT project, International Healthy Diet. And I copy exactly what is written in this EAT Lancet report. Mediterranean diet has emerged as a pattern that promotes good health. Indeed, in epidemiology, it is rare to have so consistent evidence of the beneficial effects of an exposure as it has been shown for the Mediterranean diet. A diet that maximizes longevity, improves health-related quality of life, and is ecologically sustainable and environmentally friendly. Thus, Mediterranean diet today has evolved from being a healthy dietary pattern to a sustainable dietary pattern. And this has a lot to do with the goal 12. Why that? It's a plant-based diet with low consumption of animal products, smaller water footprint, lower greenhouse gas emission, and so on and so on. Thus, the European Green Deal, they were dreaming of having a European natural, Europe to become a natural, a climate neutral continent. That's why we have the European Green Deal, and that's why the farm to fork strategy has been developed since 2020. I think that now they have a new version, but I have the feeling that Mediterranean diet is not included even in the last version of the farm to fork strategy. Then it was also a committee. It was asked the European Union asked the academies of Europe to write a report on sustainable food consumption by SAPEA, which is available in the internet. I can provide you all this information or the links. And then to me it was very important, and it was again not mentioned, that the editors of the main medical journal in 2021, and when I'm saying the medical journal, like New England Journal of Medicine, British Medical Journal, The Lancet, followed by decades of other medical journals. They say, come on, we have to do something. Because we have to change our dietary patterns. Because the way we are eating is bad for our health. And again, silence. Then I want to point out to that, in 2010, UNESCO recognized Mediterranean diet as intangible cultural heritage. I'm coming at the beginning of my presentation when I said that Mediterranean diet is not a sheet of paper with calories and foods. It's a way of living. Thus, UNESCO recognized Mediterranean diet as an intangible cultural heritage because its practice is based on a set of skills, knowledge, practices, and traditions, ranging from the landscape to cuisine. And to this extent, I want to mention that when we try to find the why the mechanism the Mediterranean diet is so protective, on the table very often is mentioned the traditional foods and the way the foods they are produced and cooked. That has a lot to do with the beneficial effects of Mediterranean diet, but maybe in another occasion I will be more analytical on that because time is flying and I have to stop my presentation soon. So, it's what I told you, that traditional Mediterranean diet is associated with longer survival. This could be partly attributed to Mediterranean traditional food on which this diet largely relies. In our everyday meals here in Crete, even yesterday night, when we sit to have a meal, they offer us so many kinds of salads. They offer us fish, little fish. They didn't offer us a lot of meat, but the way they were cooked, quite often we forget about the various herbs we were using. Oregano, basilicum, parsley. You know how many antioxidants they offer us in every diet without understanding, without knowing what we are taking, and instead we are going to buy supplements without eating fruits, without eating vegetables, without adding these herbs in our daily meals. So, by the way, we have published a study about the supplement consumption in Greece. In Greece, from our national survey, in Greece, in 2015, because now it's much higher, 1 out of 2 Greeks, they consume supplements. And their characteristics are, they are educated, and they are high consumer of fruits and vegetables. So they are not taken by the person which really might need them because they have a bad diet. So, Mediterranean diet for the 5th year was ranked first in the world. That means that Mediterranean diet is very popular outside the Mediterranean region. But the transferability of Mediterranean diet outside the Mediterranean region, it might be possible, but it's not an easy task. Because this transferability implies changes in dietary habits. And as my colleague mentioned before, dietary habits, they are deeply rooted. They express ourselves. They are deeply rooted in tradition. They are in local products, in the way of cooking. So, how we are going to, in a way, the whole world take profit of some of the lessons taught by the Mediterranean diet? So that's why emerged the Planeterranian diet. The Planeterranian diet is an attempt to broaden the beneficial effects of the Mediterranean diet worldwide. We have to identify a healthy dietary pattern based on food products available in the various areas of the world. You cannot ask in Sweden to eat watermelon. You cannot ask a Greek to eat berries. Correct? You cannot ask maybe some person who they do not like the olive oil to cook in olive oil. But we have to learn some lessons from the Mediterranean diet and to adapt worldwide by focusing on the local dietary habits and on the local products. This attempt was initiated almost in 1993. We developed the Mediterranean diet pyramid. And after that, in 1995, the Always, an American non-profit organization for the promotion of traditional foods, published some pyramids in the form of the Mediterranean pyramid for Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, based on local products. But further, very recently, in Napoli, the UNESCO chair for education and sustainable diet developed a program in which they divided the world in 5 big areas: Oceania, North America, South America, Africa, and Asia. Europe is out. And then they studied the dietary habits and the local products. And they said, come on, we have to develop on this concept a pyramid for them. Indicatively, I will show 2 pyramids. For Africa, they form a pyramid and they mention tefts. Tefts is a local, in Eritrea and in Ethiopia, grain, which is higher content in protein than wheat. It's very similar to wheat. It's not only that, very high in iron. Even they say that the pregnant women in Ethiopia, they do not suffer from iron deficiency because of theft. And then they have another oil they are using, moringa oil, which is very similar to olive oil, high in monosaturated and relatively high unsaturated, but not saturated. And similarly, they worked for Latin America, mentioning a banana, which is called platanus. This banana is local and is very high in protein, as well as quinoa, is a pseudo-cereals with excellent nutritional properties. I think that this approach maybe is unreal, but might be interested and it needs further consideration. And closing my presentation, I hope that I was asked originally for 1 hour presentation, and sorry, it was too long. I could not shorten more because you must be tired now. Closing, I want to tell you that we have to move from science to faith. Not to abandon science, there are many open questions. But what is much more needed is policy, political decisions, political programs, and not only considering health, but also considering culture, environment, and economy. Thank you very much.
questions, maybe 2 or 3, not very many. Please raise your hands.
And ask for the microphone.
Hi, thanks very much. You mentioned before that changing people's dietary habits is very difficult, even for very smart people, where all the evidence is totally overwhelming that eating a plant-based diet is better for the environment. Still, they resist this change. So in this last slide, you say we need to move from evidence to policies. So what kind of policies do you think you envision for the future that can convince people to change the way that they do things?
First of all, change the dietary habits in various nations. We have very high consumption of meat. And I think I was thinking yesterday, I was impressed with going to the university, to the technical university, that they have a bigger restaurant where I think one told me that you serve 1,000 students per day. Maybe more. So and then I remember that in Tufts and in Harvard, in the universities, they have developed corner with healthy diet. And then in their cuisine, they have a policy to restrict the meat consumption. So, I mean, this might be an activity this project to develop and to intervene, because learning by the example what they are eating and to explain to them why. This is the policy. But then on the level of a national level, for example, in my country, we see what is happening. We are abandoning the best diet in the world. Our children are becoming obese. And then it has been proven millions of euros they can be spent with intervention projects. Have you seen the obesity in Europe? So, other kinds of intervention they are needed. Might be taxes. I mean, in Mexico, they are very successful in taxing the animal product. In other 9,000 in South America. I'm not the person who, I'm telling you what I see what is happening. I don't know what is best. What I know very well, that intervention in the school canteens is something very important. Because you have a captive audience, very willing to understand, educated, and then they might spread the idea.
Maybe this is a very good moment to say this, because it's very nice you introduced this. From now on, we actually decided, so this is going to be from, not really now, but it's been a little time that we've been thinking about this. So in our next review week, because we come together every let's say, 6 months, and it's always a whole bunch of people, a big group, and we said next time, the main choice is vegetarian. If you want to go for meat, you have to tick a box before. If you forget it, vegetarian option. So this is at least the first little step.
Yeah, you should do some Crete and vegetarian recipes.
Thank you, that's a great one. Yes, so I'm sure many of us will realize how much variety there is actually, and it doesn't need to be as much meat as we are always eating. So thank you.
sorry, I'm here. It's a question and it's also maybe inspiration to reflect on why this is changing, why we are living these patterns. I'm Italian, from Sardinia.
Wow.
And why I'm still cooking in a Mediterranean way, struggling everyday life of timing, even if we have a stressful life, is because I learned it from my mom, and I like to eat, and to eat in company. And often you find me in the office, sitting looking for colleagues, and maybe I spend some time on cooking something in the cuisine office. But the question is why everyone is abandoning this. I reflect on two aspects. One is the women roles. Who was cooking most? The mamas, the grandmothers, and the fact that now we work more, and the fact that we have a stressful life. And cooking as we food requires time. So maybe we have to reflect on the patterns you described. We're also including aspect of culture and how we live. So maybe we should, is a decision that every single person should do on us giving more time to the cooking phase as a family or as a person. Maybe it's just a comment, not really expressing, but you have something to comment on that. Thanks.
It's true that the whole issue is much more social. Also, basically, keep it saying that the obesity issue is a social problem. It's also climate change, so but I think that we have to move taking under account of what is happening. I think to my great surprise, the young men, they are very happy. They change dramatically. I mean, 40 years ago, you would never see a man carrying a baby in their hands. Now I see men, young men, 30 years old, they have their baby, you know, and they are so, they express their love, and then they have their wives. So there is a change, I mean, but on the other hand, marketing is very important. Marketing is very important. And marketing is uncontrolled. And then I do not think that it's a question of time. Because you can have the Mediterranean diet, the ladera, which we call the ladera dish, ladera, which is in Greek, and oil. And ladera are all the foods which they are almost 9% of our foods. They are foods with olive oil, and then vegetables. The ladera, we can eat for a week in the Mediterranean. You cannot keep it. And then with the pressure cooks now, you can put them very, very. It's a question of teaching them and testing them. Yesterday I was with a colleague and I understand that in some countries how to reduce meat, but with all my respect, whenever we have foreign friends here and we offer the Greek dishes, they never ask meat because they are tasty the way we are cooking, because it's not only vegetables. They were asking me in the United States how to eat eggplants or zucchini, so many zucchini, because we do not eat them raw. We can eat it easily. 2 or 300 grams of eggplants and zucchini, they are right in food. You know, it works for many years. So if you teach them, it might be a solution.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. Inspirational talk. Now, I would like to invite all of you to move to the back behind this auditorium. There is the reception, and Professor Trichopoulou, we promise we're gonna start our Mediterranean diet pattern on Monday. So till Monday, we can enjoy whatever we have prepared for you, guilt-free. Thank you very much again.